मॉनिटर जैसे कैसे दिखूंगा?
So, very good afternoon to all of you, the members who have joined, and thank you so much for giving us a second opportunity of starting this season 2 of our COVID times. And now we are shifting from the presentation mode to an place where we actually need to discuss and debate a lot what exactly has to be the policies or the recommendations or the suggested guidelines to be when we are going into lockdown 3.0, and it is going to ease out in some or the other situations. So accordingly, the diagnostic services, the healthcare services, the clinics are going to get started and going to get open on the front. So what exactly are we going to know or to discuss on this? So we here as a diagnostic industry, as an IVD industry, and the diagnostic services across the India are actually looking forward to what exactly has to be done in this current pandemic situation, because there have been many speculations, many fear factor also involved in the healthcare system or healthcare workers whether to do a touch technique or not. So if we can see around, there are the services which caters to the emergency department, the routine monitoring and the screening are the radiological and the pathological services, which becomes the backbone of any of the healthcare system across the globe, or say across any healthcare system. So if we say if there is one picture which says we stay here for you, you stay at home, which is not going to be situation and scenario for upcoming days. People have to come out and start doing the process and the procedures and the work which they were assigned to, and especially the healthcare worker has to come into the field to start working effectively. How it is going to change the system, the way we were working 100 days earlier, it will be in some or the other way the improvisation or the methods has to change as we were processing and doing our day-to-day activities and at our professional as well as our personal levels. So with this, today we have two eminent speakers to speak on and to have a discuss and a live debate. So before going ahead, I will like to ensure all the audiences if there is any technical glitch or any problem they are suffering, please reconnect. They can raise a request to talk to our speakers. They can put up their feedback, queries or comments on any of the questions which are coming up. This is absolutely open discussion which is going to be there, so that we share the like minds across the nation. So herein first I would like to introduce Dr. Praveen Gulati, who is an MD radiology and a chief radiologist at Gulati Imaging Center, which is in Delhi. He is a member of accreditation committee of NABH, and he has more than 100 publications to his credentials. So very good afternoon, sir, to joining with us. He
Good
will be
afternoon,
more
everyone.
so, Dr. Gulati will be more so talking on the arena of what the challenges the diagnostic service is suffering on the radiology front. What are the diagnostic tests and the tools available today to encounter or understand this COVID-19 situation with the routine testings? Secondly, as the diagnostic cannot be completed without pathologist or the lab professionals, so here we have a very dear friend as well as a known faculty and a personality in the field of pathology and hematopathology, Dr. Anil Handu, who is a senior consultant hematologist and senior director, hospital lab services, academic affairs and research at BLK Kapoor Memorial Hospital. He have many credentials to his academics, as well as he has done many publications, and I know him personally when I have started learning my flow cytometry and had a lot of discussions and attended his seminar, and it's a very beautiful and speaker on all the front. So herein, without uh, doing anything more and talking here and there in this lockdown 3.0, I'll straight away come up to the points what we need to discuss and let the people understand. So this is the first question which is coming up as a debate or as an understanding. So how, what are the important diagnostic tests? We have been understanding coronavirus in and out. I think WhatsApp can, or the Facebook can create a WhatsApp university now to give us, which has given a lot of understanding about the virus itself. But still, there are questions and queries. Okay, what is a definitive diagnosis? How do we move ahead? So, Dr. Gulati, first of, I would like to take your take on this. Like, what are the main important imaging modalities? What are the important findings which we see in specifically in COVID-19 cases? And what is the role of imaging during monitoring of these services?
First of all, I thank you for inviting for this very important webinar. It's a very important for all of us to know about all the diagnostic aspects. Can we move on to my slides, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, this is how the all world has changed. We started with the bat and the reservoir and the crowd, and then the entire world has changed. Everything changed after this. Talking about the role of radiology. Now, if you look at the overall type of infections we have, most of the infections, about 80% of these infections are mild. So in 80%, the radiology practically does not have any role to play. The role comes in the rest of the 20%. Now, if you talk about the imaging modalities, the four important imaging modalities we have are the plain X-rays, CT, ultrasound, and MR. And in this era of in this period when COVID is all around, as far as radiology is concerned, everybody talks about X-rays and CT, right? But we should think not only about today, but about tomorrow also. When COVID came, practically all the symptoms, they were related to the chest. The four commonest symptoms people presented was the sore throat, the fever, myalgia, and for that, they thought only X-ray and CT will be playing a role. But every day new symptoms are coming up. The patients are presenting every day with new symptoms. There are patients who present with loss of taste, patients presenting with loss of smell. There are reports where patients have presented with paraplegia, patients have presented with stroke. So every day things are changing. We are learning every day something new. New presentations are coming. And when these new presentations are come, the role of the modalities, they also change. So in times to come, our role will be limited not only to X-rays, CT, ultrasound, and MR. But before I start moving on to these modalities, first of all, I would like to say none of the imaging modalities, whether X-ray or CT or ultrasound or MR, are for the screening purposes. They are only indicated in such situations. In 80% of situations, you don't need them, right? So talking first about which modality is the first one to be used. If required, the first modality is the X-ray, then followed by CT. The role of imaging basically comes when your diagnosis is in doubt. Number two, to assess the severity of the disease. Number three, to monitor the disease. And number four, very important, to rule out other causes of the patient's symptomatology. It's only in these four situations that we have to take the help of the radiology department. Now, why are we scared of radiology in COVID patients? Why are we more scared than others? And if you see, of all the sources where this COVID-19 can sit, the maximum is at cardboard, the stainless steel, the plastic. And these are all because we are dealing with the equipment, so there are plenty of these surfaces available. So we have to take extra precautions when patient comes to the radiology or when we have to do the investigation. All these big organizations, all these associations, the American College of Radiology, Society of Thoracic Radiology, American Society of Emergency Radiology, even the Flexner or even European societies, they all agree at least on one point. And that one point is none of the imaging modality is to be used for screening purposes. So then where to used for. Even the Indian Society has come out with its own recommendation. And even the Indian Radiological Imaging Association says not to be used for screening at all. If the patient is positive, mild cases, again, there is no role of radiology. But if the patient has some extra symptoms or if patient has comorbidity factor, he's at higher risk, you can take a baseline X-ray test, not the CT. If patient has moderate to severe, again, X-ray test is the basic thing. So the first imaging modality to be used is X-ray test. The role of CT comes only in situations, number one, if there is a patient who you think symptomatically he fits into COVID, but he is not COVID positive, do a CT scan. There have been few reports available where CT becomes positive before the COVID. So you can follow these cases. Then number two is to look for the severity of the disease. Then to monitor the disease. And then after that, to exclude other causes of the symptomatology. So these are basically the consensus where all what is to be used. So all imaging modalities, X-rays or CT, only to look for the complications. Now these are the situations where we should go for X-ray test. If the patient is having fever, patient having shortness of breath, is immunocompromised, or if the oxygen saturation levels, they have gone down below 94%. In these situations, X-ray test is really recommended. And this is just to show you what we expect in the X-ray test. There will be multiple focal areas of consolidation. These small opacities, what you are seeing, this is what is seen in patients of COVID. But we must keep one thing in mind, that although you are seeing these findings, they are not highly specific for COVID, right? They are sensitive, but not specific. Now then, where comes the role of CT? Now look at this X-ray test. This is totally normal. But here, patient was mildly symptomatic, COVID positive, and you are seeing these small, what we typically describe as ground glass type of opacity. These have been, when they're peripherally located, especially in the lower lobes, these ground glass opacities, they have been found to be the commonest finding in COVID, especially in mild cases. And once the severity goes, then you start picking up bigger and bigger lesions, more of complications are seen. So to conclude, screening, no CT, suspected case, if COVID negative, but patient symptomatic, go for CT scan. And then in proven cases, to assess the severity, different types of CT scorings have been given. And these scorings can be used to monitor the disease process. So this is all about the imaging modalities we have. We will subsequently discuss about MR, about the ultrasound as well.
So here I shift to Dr. Handu. So what do you think in the pathological aspect or the laboratory aspect? Today we all know RT-PCR is the only resource which can give you an idea about the diagnostics, right? And herein, when we say definitively this patient is going to be COVID, is only RT-PCR. But if we don't have an RT-PCR, or if there is a negativity, so like I had put something of an, is there a use of any additional or supportive lab parameters which can be helpful and say, okay, this is COVID-19 infection?
Okay, so if I have understood your question correctly, what I personally feel is that we are now looking at a strategy where we may not have RT-PCR, we may not really have an antibody-based testing also available, right. Yet we should have something available with us which can, potentially tell us that perhaps this patient is having COVID and might need to really look out for getting an RT-PCR done and then take it from there. Right. Now, if you could pull my presentation in, and I would like to take you to one of the slides there. Can you just pull it in?
Right.
Yeah, so just let me take you to a particular slide which will actually make us understand as to what I'm talking about. So if we look at it from this slide itself, we're talking about a screening test versus a diagnostic test, And what would have made our life very, very simple would have been that we have a test where we are able to do it quickly, just like something like what we do for malaria. Have a card, just put an antigen there, we get to know that the antigen is positive, and we could just relate to it and say, okay, fine, this guy is having COVID, or the other guy is not having COVID. Of course, there are a lot of guidelines which are available for this, but we will not get into details of that, because even today we are already seeing that there is a lot of issue about the rapid tests. And to make the matters worse, the antigen part of it is still not being recommended neither by WHO nor by CDC. So practically speaking, what are you left with? You are left with your usual routine ancillary testing, and those ancillary testing subsequently complemented with the tests which are available on your screen just now. So these tests will eventually be able to tell you whether you're dealing with what you're dealing with, right? Now, whenever we are trying to look at a test, we have to keep two things in mind. We are looking at sensitivity, and we are also looking at specificity. The ideal test would be that I have a 100% sensitive and a 100% specific test, but there is hardly a test in this world which is like that. So therefore, if we look at any test, we're looking at a test which is able to give me true positives and true negatives very, very clearly. And worst is that even with the RT-PCR test that we have, even that is not so great, because even there we have almost 33% cases where we will not get a positivity, and it may actually be a positive case. So having said that, what other option do we have in that case? So if I just move you through quickly through another slide, there is this particular modality which one can look at. These are the other tests which are available in literature, and this I have taken from one of the publications. And if you notice, what is very obvious is there are many other tests which are available, if you see all of them in the list here. But what strikes out very clearly is this red dotted line which you can see on the top on the regression analysis. And this red dotted line actually represents the CRP, which is your C-reactive protein, one of the tests which we keep on doing usually, in our routine practice. And look at it from another study where they have tried to correlate between the CRP and correlate it with the lung lesions. As you see, the lung lesions, the most critical group, which has got bigger lung lesions, the CRP becomes higher and higher. So therefore, if we have a combination where we look at CRP, we look at lymphopenia, which is so commonly associated with COVID-19, and we also have parallelly our radiological investigations, perhaps we could always depend a lot on them, because there are lots of cases where they have found that RT-PCR turns out to be negative. So if we look at algorithm, what people try to look at, especially in the current scenario where we're looking at moving into active practice, we have to look at symptomatics versus asymptomatics. And perhaps if you look at this scenario itself, a complete blood count with the CRP will really make a big impact, because if we have a CBC where we have significant lymphopenia, and at the same time we have a CRP which is very high, and we keep monitoring CRP levels on a regular basis, and having a lymphopenia which is falling, and again CRP which is going up, you're perhaps dealing with COVID. So perhaps this is one algorithm which people can look into and adopt it till such time as everyone would have a possibility of having a RT-PCR and also having an antibody testing together. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, sir, on that. Dr. Gulati, I need to ask one thing, what Dr. Handu had shown in this slide. Have you encountered this? Because this literature, we had also seen, and we don't know. The level of CRP versus the diameter of the lung damage. All right. Is there any evidences which has been clear cut from Indian data coming up in association of CRP and the diameter of the lung by doing a CT or an X-ray?
I don't think we have any Indian data where they have tried to correlate the CRP finding with the CT test finding. I'm not aware of any Indian data like that. No.
Okay, because this has been spoken and given through even the literatures coming from the Chinese as well as the American guidelines nowadays. Yeah. And we also have been looking in forward with the hospitals or the clinics where they are doing COVID testing versus this, so that we understand, is this meta-analysis actually working for our conditions or not. So
can I just add one thing here?
Yes, sir, sure.
Till date, what is happening in our country presently is that I don't think any of the setups are routinely doing CTs in these cases. Most of the cases where imaging is being done, that's primarily plain X-rays. At least in Delhi, I tried talking to different hospitals as well, and none of them said that they do CT routinely in these cases. They are doing only plain X-ray. So we don't have any data with us as things stand today. which correlates with the CT findings with the CRP findings. But yes, in Western literature, there are different studies which have been quoted, which have tried to correlate the different lab parameters with the CT findings. And I would also just like to stress one more thing, which Dr. Handu was also showing in his slide, that they have definitely reported few cases where CTs have become positive before the PCR test has become positive, right? So if there's a strong clinical suspicion of COVID positive, even of the patient being COVID positive, we can do, or we should do, a CT scan even if the PCR is negative. So that is one thing we have to keep in mind. In different literature in China as well as in US, they have seen CTs where PCR was negative, but CT has shown ground glass opacity. And these patients ultimately turn out to be PCR positive.
Okay. So, Handu sir, that means is this CRP, which was supposed to be not done so much, as is the COVID infection given it an importance of helping in some or the other way?
Well, see, we are not a designated COVID hospital in my place. We are a hospital which, however, sees patients coming in, and a few of them do turn out to be COVID positive. We are doing CRP assays on all of them. And what we have observed, at least in our practices, yes, they have lymphopenia. We have also observed that they have increased levels of CRP. And if you keep monitoring CRP on a regular basis, the CRP keeps on going up, especially on the patients who are moving on to a ventilator. So therefore, with our small little anecdotal practice that we have had in some of the cases here so far, which is about less than 10 cases, what we are observing is CRP is likely to give us some information. And if somebody is having fever and is also having lymphopenia with a CRP, perhaps you should start looking for COVID in such cases. Why am I saying this specifically is because you even today are having a lot of issues in getting your testing done, especially the RT-PCR. The challenge is that people are not even allowing you to do a test. So that's also another challenge which one is facing currently. So getting a test and then getting the results quickly is also becoming a challenge. So in the circumstances where you have a patient who has not gotten a COVID test done, but is having a CRP which is going up and parallelly is having lymphopenia and is also deteriorating over a period of time, in all such cases, an effort should be done for triaging and getting the COVID testing done quickly. So if I put CRP there, I would definitely want to make it as one of the important parameters in the modality of management of these patients, where I would take a CRP, I would do a CBC, and at the same time, I would also do an RT-PCR. Now, what would help me eventually is declining CRP levels are actually correlating with better patient outcomes. And that is what would actually help me when I'm going to put a patient in my hospital for COVID treatment and I'm observing over next few days, because I'll not keep on doing RT-PCR every day, but I can keep doing CRP every day and see as to how the CRP falls down. If it goes down significantly and the patient gets improvement, I am already looking at a better outcome. So that's where I personally feel that CRP will have a role to play, and correlating along with CBC will make a big impact.
Right. So I think we understood what are the modalities which can be on the either side of the diagnostic part can help in deciding what is a COVID positive or maybe or suspected case of COVID positive in some time, where we have an limitations of doing some like an RT-PCR and we're still waiting for the antibody testing or antigen testing to come up. So with this, I'll move on to the another question which can be seen by everyone. So this is what I wanted to understand from the diagnostic front. The problem here is what is happening in this diagnostic front. We even though we were in this lockdown situation from last 60 days, but healthcare is an essential service which has to be there. We cannot deny, but still there is a fear factor which is already been built up, and automatically the people reaching out for the healthcare or the healthcare staff is I think come down to 20-30% in every of the scenarios. And probably we in the diagnostic part, let it be radiology, pathology, or microbiology, or any other aspect, people are the patient are directly exposed to the healthcare staff. So how do you see these challenges coming up, which is like I had put it across like a department preparedness for COVID-19, which is going to be there after lockdown 3.0, or say continuing with this current pandemic situation? So what challenges do we seek in radiology, pathology, or lab operations department? How do we identify these patients who can be probable risk of having COVID? Is do we need to keep a infection control committee, which was actually a part of hospital committees, which takes care of ICUs and the ORs and the operation theaters and ERs? But will it become a mandatory thing in the diagnostic services? Is there any specific problems to the country what we are having with all this? So, Dr. Gulati, what would be your take on this?
Can we shift to my? Can you shift to my slides, please?
Yeah, surely.
See, the radiology or any diagnostic setup, they are going to be totally different during this period and even the post-COVID. We have to accept the fact that now we have to live with COVID for quite some time to come. So we have to change our way of working based upon the present situation. As far as your question of an infection control committee is concerned, it's already a must by NABH. Any center, any hospital, whether diagnostic center or a lab or a hospital, they have to have an infection control committee in their setup, whether small setup or larger setup. And now in the present scenario, it will become must. And the role of infection control committee is going to be much more. Then the second thing is the challenges which are going to be faced. There are challenges which are being faced by the whole of world, but they are much more relevant to our country because of two reasons. Number one, the population. We know about how huge population we have. And the second thing is the lack of resources. If you see the look at the resources, we have practically nothing as compared to what US or even the rest of the European world has. So these two things we have to keep in mind when we plan our future. So everything will start right from the patient enters to your department. You have to screen the patient right there. As far as we are concerned, we have formulated one forma. When at the reception when he is entering, we have to check the temperature of the patient. That we are doing with everyone, and you have to check the temperature of the attendant also. Try to restrict the number of attendants who have to go inside. Preferably not more than one should be allowed to go inside. We should try to do all the registrations online so that the time which patient spends at the reception is low. We should try to get all the payments done digitally. That again will help. And then after that, we have to see the patients who are likely to be COVID positive and then who are not likely to be COVID positive. We have formulated, or most of us, we have one questionnaire which we ask the patient and attendant to fill, and that is some very simple basic questions. We ask them, does he have any of the following symptoms? And these are all the common symptoms, which does not only include the fever, headache, cough, sore throat, running nose, weakness, but also we see whether he's having shortness of breath, any loss of taste and smell. I tell you, in Delhi, I know quite a few patients, in fact, there are doctors also, who presented primarily with the loss of smell. So this is one which we have to ask the patient. And now we are even seeing loose motion or the abdominal complaints also as a symptom. So if patient is having any one of these symptoms, he has to say yes. And that raises the doubt that he may be COVID positive. Then we also take the history from his about his family. Is there any COVID positive patient in their family, or anybody in whose contact he has come? Any past history? Has he ever been asked to get self-quarantined by the government in the near past? So all these questions, they are to be asked. And we also ask if he has already been done the COVID testing or not. Then it's very, very essential that right from the beginning, everybody has to be masked. Your staff, the patient entering, the attendant. So mask is very, very essential. So all these things become important when you take the patient. And after taking the patient, then it's important that there should be no overcrowding. You have to plan the appointment. Patient should not be taken without appointment. If you think that too many patients who have come together, ask them that they stayed in their car. Note down their phone numbers. You can call them when their turn comes, but never, you have to follow the rule of distancing very, very strictly. This is a very basic thing. And then after that comes the overall your space. You have to be very careful about the disinfection. There should be a proper team. There should be one man who should be handling the disinfection component of the entire setup, and that is for all the spaces. Each and every corner of the of your place should be disinfected regularly. At a regular interval, you should have a protocol. Like your bathrooms, preferably every 2 hours, they have to be properly disinfected. Then the proper disinfection of your radiology department, the CT, ultrasound, X-ray. Try to declutter your department. The more the cluttering, the more the unnecessary things lying in your room, you are increasing the chances of infection because you are providing more surface to the virus. And then how each CT or X-ray or MR, they are to be disinfected. That itself, that you have to do regularly at regular intervals. How regular it has to be depends upon what type of patients you are doing. If we have time, we can discuss that later. But all these things are important. Then staff management. The staff management becomes very important. In staff, you try to see that only call those staff members at a time which are essential. The work which can be done by one person, don't call two persons.
Sorry, sir. I would like to interrupt. Dr. Rajiv Anand has joined. He has some query. So you guys can please answer, sir.
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. Rajiv Anand, are you there? Dr. Rajiv Anand, please turn on your mic.
So we have an attendee coming on live and with a question, I guess. And we are waiting for him. He's already joined in. So we are waiting for his query or the voice to come up.
Okay. So in the meantime, I can start, right? I can continue?
Yes.
Okay. Then comes the question of your staff management. The work which can be done at home. If you can get your CTs and MRs reported by teleradiology, utilize those services. Whatever can be done at home, where doctors' presence is not required inside your setup, try doing that. Then even sending the reports, you don't have to call the people back to collect the reports. You can send them. We have the digital means nowadays. Try to use digital means as far as possible. So you have to work at all the levels. You work at the level of your resources. You have to see that we are not very rich in resources. The utilization of PPPs. It's very essential that you have adequate number of PPPs, and we don't have that many. So you have to address questions for your PPPs. You have to address questions for your staff because it is your duty to provide adequate number of PPPs to your staff as well as to your patients. So the staff management, the management of your setup, and organization of the studies, they all have to be taken into account, keeping in view the change scenario.
Dr. Handu, what is your take on this? How do we or the laboratory department has to keep preparing? Because there are many sections as radiology. We also have a patient coming in at the center for OPD basis or say for IPD basis. There would be many more changes which are going to occur which were not there earlier. So how do we or your take on this would be?
Okay, so most of the stuff which Dr. Gulati has mentioned applies to pathology laboratories as well, because for all practical purposes, we happen to be a space. We also happen to have the similar kind of challenges, and most of us follow the similar practices. Now, having said what I said, there are certain unique challenges to the laboratory. One of the biggest challenges, it's not only to the laboratory, I think the unique challenge that we face in our country was demonstrated the moment the liquor shops were opened up. You know, on a lighter note, if you see, the way people just thronged to the liquor shops and forgot about everything. They just wanted to have the booze.
Right.
It's a similar kind of a concept which will happen the moment you're going to open up your hospitals, your laboratories, etc. for regular testing. You're going to see a lot of patients coming in. You're going to see a lot of people walking into your systems, and they will overwhelm your systems for all practical purposes. Now, the biggest challenge will be how will you ensure with that kind of volumes to screen the people? How will you ensure that if somebody is screened and he turns out to be positive, what will you do in such a case? and what all will you take care of eventually once you're trying to sample. I'll give you an example from real life. There is a patient who walks in, and he primarily, because he was supposedly having sore throat, he was sent to the flu clinic. The flu clinic decides to get his sampling done for the COVID testing. So the guy goes to the sample area for which the COVID testing has been designated. He goes there, gets the sampling done. At the same time, he also wants to get tested for complete blood counts, CRP, etc., etc. Now, the area where you're taking the COVID sample is different than the area where you're supposed to be taking the blood samples and the rest of the samples. Now, that gets you into a much bigger challenge, because now suddenly you actually need to make sure that even in that area where the sampling is being done, adequate precautions are taken. And you cannot have air mixing of that area also with the rest of the place, because it's the same individual who's traveling there. Or you need to make sure that where you took the sample, for the RT-PCR itself, you are able to take the blood samples there itself. So therefore, for all practical purposes, the challenges are many. It is difficult for anyone to really come out with a final logical conclusion right away. We are seeing directives and stuff changing by the hour. There are lots of changes which have come in even on the ICMR website in the last, about 1.5 years that we've been through. And every time there's a revised thing which keeps coming, and we have to then start adapting. The other challenge which I have already, started feeling, which is pretty unique to us in our country, and that is almost everybody else seems to know everything about the laboratory, and nobody wants to ask the laboratory guy what you need. For example, there is an order which has come, by the High Court, by the Honorable High Court, which says, make sure that the report is given in 24 to 48 hours. Now, you do not realize that the samples might be so many that the people may not be able to take care of it. Similarly, there are others who are saying, give everything free. So there are a lot of other issues, similar issues, which will come up, which will need to be handled. Now, coming into the laboratory, once we are in the lab, how will we manage the samples which are coming in? And these samples may not be only the respiratory samples which have come for the RT-PCR. You will have samples of blood, you will have samples of stool, you will have samples of urine, you will have samples of other body fluids which will come in. And they may be coming from COVID patients, they may not be coming from COVID patients. How will you make sure that you're segregating them? So all of these issues are there, which, of course, there are a few guidelines which are available, which most of us can refer to. But the proof of the pudding lies in eating. So therefore, when you actually really practice in your real practice and look at these aspects, you find it's not so easy. The other important aspect is the scare. There's a lot of scare within the individuals when they are trying to deal with the samples. For example, I'll give an example of the samples of real-time PCR, the nasal samples and the swabs, which have to come from the inpatient departments of the hospital. So our practice so far was that we would keep it in one of the areas outside of the hospital. So all the samples would go there, they would get segregated, and then they would travel to the molecular biology lab. Little did we realize what will happen to the samples coming later in the night. So therefore, again, you had to redesign in your own area as to how we will collect those samples. Now you have designated a specific refrigerator for that, and a lot of people don't even want to touch that area, don't even want to stand there. So, there are many challenges which will keep coming, but I think it is only by practice that you will realize where you will need to modify your practices. Having said whatever I said, the most important aspect is ensuring appropriate universal precautions, ensuring use of good and appropriate PPE, and making sure that you have an appropriate, de-infection or making the protocols in such a way that you're able to clean up the area nicely and making sure that, you're not carrying infection further. I think these will be my takes on this particular aspect.
All right. With the same thing.
Yeah. Sir, I would like to interrupt for a minute. Dr. Dharap is on air. He has some queries. Dr. Dharap, sir, please.
Yeah. Excellent discussion going on. I'm Dr. Parag Dharap. I work in a private practicing clinical laboratory, which I am running throughout the entire lockdown period. Sir, my problem is, even if I have a screening form, first of all, the patients, many a times they lie about it. Secondly, even if there is a positive response, is it going to change the process which I am having of registration and blood collection and going likewise? I mean, based on the screening form, can one actually filter out the patient, or is it going to change or make a change in handling of the patient in any way? Secondly, most of the times what I am seeing is patients are already coming with fever. And here in Mumbai, we have already started getting malaria. And every day, there are 2 or 4 patients which are malaria positive. So, the importance or significance of this screening form in a routine pathology laboratory, I'm not able to judge the significance of it, nor testing the temperature of a patient. So, what do you feel, Dr. Gulati, since you are using this kind of a screening form? What way it can help for a laboratory?
See, as far I can tell you about, I think about laboratory, Dr. Handu will tell you better. As far as the radiology part is concerned, I can answer that. Yes, it does help. At least it helps you in segregating 2 types of patients. There are patients where you're sure that he's not going to have COVID. Then we have suspect, and then we have the proven cases. So you can segregate these patients. Number one, you can plan your studies accordingly. First of all, do cases which are normal. Never try to mix up the 3 type of cases where you're sure that they are the normal COVID, not this thing. Then the suspect, and after that the that's the COVID positive cases. Like if you have to do a CT scan of a patient who you know that is COVID positive. You try to call that patient in the last of your day, so that by that time you have done the rest of the patient. Similarly, suppose you have sent your technician in the ICU to do the X-rays of number of patients. Now, then definitely the serial should be, first of all, we should do X-rays of all normal where you are not suspecting COVID. Then where there is you are not sure, maybe positive, maybe negative. And last of all, you have to do the patients who are COVID positive. Then it will also make a difference in the type of precautions you are taking with your staff and with the equipment. So it is definitely going to change the way you are planning your studies. That's as far as the radiology is concerned. And again, the post study, that will make a difference. If you've done a CT of a COVID positive patient, you have to treat it differently. The disinfection of that room has to be different if you have done a positive case. While if the case has not been positive, about the screening, you are sure that it is unlikely that he's going to have he has to be treated differently. So it is going to make a difference, at least in the radiology setup. But I don't know about the lab. That I think Dr. Hato will tell you better.
I think laboratory will be much more difficult to handle such kind of patients.
I agree with you, Dr. Parag. I think with respect to, you already just nailed the thing, because when you said that you have patients who are having malaria or who are having, say, dengue, because there is a alert already by the WHO that there will be a dengue in India this year. So if we look at this entire scenario, you're going to have patients coming in with fever and maybe no other symptoms at all, and you can have similar symptomatology even in COVID. So therefore, depending upon only a form in a laboratory might be a bit of a challenge, which I genuinely feel that it is. And at the same time, for you to really segregate them and then take them out and put them in a different collection area and stuff like that is practically not possible, especially if we look at a laboratory which is not really going to have a resource of having a separate sample collection area. So what I would probably emphasize more on is ensuring appropriate use of the masks. As long as we are able to take care of that, appropriate use of the hand sanitizer, ensuring the appropriate hygiene, taking good universal precautions, we are likely to take care of what we are needing to do as far as the laboratories is concerned. And also another point we would like to make here is we will have to live with COVID now. This is what I have been able to figure out with whatever little experience we've been having for the last about a month or so, where we have observed that there are so many people who are absolutely asymptomatic. You are actually sitting down with them on a daily basis, and they actually are harboring COVID. So therefore, depending on only the fever part of it, only the symptomatic ones, because you're only looking at the symptomatic ones, which are less than 15% of the cases. Rest 85% will not have symptoms, and you will really not be able to pick them otherwise. So what I suggest is follow the precautions the way we are expected to. proper mask, sanitizers, ensuring appropriate use of the PPE for the person who's actually taking samples. He's also masked and making sure that he wears gloves, etc. Change of gloves after every patient, etc. If all that is done, we are likely to minimize it as much as we can. We all understand that we will not be able to make it zero, because this is where we stand today.
Will you suggest wearing the entire full PPE or mask, sanitizer, gloves? I think that should be sufficient.
I think a mask, a sanitizer, and gloves is good enough. Trying to do anything beyond that would be only when you're sure of some aerosols getting generated. That take a nasal swab or a pharyngeal swab, and that is anyways going to be done only in a designated laboratory, because the government itself is very clear about where you can get it done. So as long as you're not getting into the typical COVID testing of taking samples from the nasal and the oropharyngeal area, rest of it, like the blood samples, the urine, etc., can be followed up and done the way we are expected to be doing in a usual practice, following appropriate norms, making sure mask is going to be a part of our life now. You can see I'm already having it here. Of course, I'm not wearing it right now. But then all this needs to be made sure that this is becoming a part of our practice and we keep doing it on a regular basis. That's the only way it is going to work now. I don't think there is going to be anything beyond that. Wearing a full PPE and changing a full PPE after every sample collection is going to be extremely expensive for the patient, and because ultimately it's the patient who pays for it. And most importantly, it's also going to be cumbersome for the laboratory to handle that. So therefore, what you just mentioned, that is probably the best way at this point of time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Dharap, and thank you both of you to take up this query directly from the audience who has been attending this session. And going to the question set, I think we had already discussed on this also while we were discussing with the previous question. Like I put it across like a non-touch techniques nowadays, because this is a practice which we have to everybody follow for this, or like as Dr. Harnu mentioned, we have to live with the COVID. We can't. There is no other skill or coming up. So these were the few of the questions, which is just an extension. So I just want to have your comment on this. How do we implement social distancing, which is very difficult? As lockdown 3.0, there was an ease to go and take to the liquor shop, and we could see what happened with the social distancing and what daily happens. Basically, what we want to understand in our service centers or at our diagnostic areas, wherein we can have what should be the strategies for the patient, especially for the staff, what we are here, right? Or the trainees or the faculties. And how do we do the improvisation and how with the requirements?
Okay, so do you want me to take that?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so the thing is, if we look at the slide topic itself, no touch technique, I wish that is something we could do. The thing is, when we want to do it also, the people themselves are not very willing and very keen for you to really adopt it. A lot of people are looking at us to start developing what is called telemedicine, which has already been approved by the Medical Council of India as well as by the state medical councils. But if you would have noticed in last few days itself, there are already lots of WhatsApps making the rounds where people themselves, the ones who are taking consult from you on a telemedicine platform, are not really very happy. And to make the matters worse, they're already talking about why you charging for it and stuff like that. So, culturally, if we look at our country, we have major issues with paying. A lot of people are not even if they can afford, they don't want to pay. We have gotten into a culture of free. Everything is wanted as free. So therefore, getting into a typical no-touch technique for anyone would be practically impossible, especially when we're looking at radiology as well as for pathology. You can leave it at a level where, okay, fine, if somebody is not taking a sample and he may not be really touching it, we may want to use digital platforms for imaging and then interpreting those slides, etc. You may look at digital imaging, which Dr. Gulati, I'm sure they're already looking into as well. But even then, an ultrasound will still have to be held by the radiologist and then done. A sample will still have to be taken for a patient as far as the pathology is concerned. And let me tell you, when you do a clinical examination, it's a very different feel than what you're going to be doing only by a no-touch technique. So if we look at a typical no-touch technique, then everybody will probably have to undergo a CT scan from head to toe. And then based on those images, one can take a call whether the spleen was enlarged or not enlarged, whether the liver is enlarged or not enlarged, and stuff like that. So practically speaking, this is not possible. Healthcare per se will have its own limitations with respect to being no touch. But yes, reduced touch is something which I perhaps would, start believing in firmly. Gone are the days when you would visit a physician and he would just hold your hand. I think probably holding a hand itself has now become a sign of
Right.
being a pariah. So I think no touch technique perhaps will not be really possible. But yes, maintaining a adequate distance, having lesser number of attendants coming into your healthcare facility, and ensuring whatever can be done without touching should be done. That's probably my take on this.
Yeah. I would like to.
How about you, sir? Yeah. Yes, sir. I mean, how do you take up to this? Because there was one question which was going on. I don't know. I mean, which relates to us also. What should be done when you do the spirometry testing? Because there the patient is directly going to blow the air outside from the mouth itself, right? So these are some of the intervention or the techniques which are going to be there. So how do we take on your aspect?
See, I can talk about the radiology part. See, what's very important, which is going to come in future, is you have to teach and you have to educate your staff very well. The regular teaching of your staff and training will become important. Then the screening, what we have already said, the mask has to be worn by everybody else. What I want from the laboratory guys is if you can come out with a test which can give us result in half an hour. Right? Like nowadays, we are in the practice of doing a CT scan. Before doing a contrast CT, we always ask for the kidney function, and we get that creatinine or the kidney function within half an hour. So if you guys can give us something like that within a patient,
Right.
By the time we fill up all the formalities, we get his COVID testing done. I think that will make things very, very simple as for not only for the radiology, but even for the other departments as well. So that's what is my wishful thinking. The rest, if we keep this thing aside.
So for with the
Yeah, please carry on. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So with this only, there was a certain other. Yeah, there was with the same thing what you were discussing right now. I mean, when you do a CT contrast, you need to have a creatinine done, so that we understand the kidney functions, and then we can take up to the patient. Similarly, there are certain questions which would be there with every one of us when we are into diagnostic service, where we have patients who directly walk in. We have patients which are already been lined up for some or the other process and the procedures. Like there was a news, I think, and it became a big news which came from Pune, Maharashtra itself. Like the radiologist was pointed out to be as an COVID positive, and then all the ANC females who were there for the testing has to be quarantined. So this is what I put up to both of you as members. Like, what would be the diagnostic challenge in the elective as well as in the emergency intervention procedures? Because in emergency we cannot deny, we cannot wait moment. Okay, now we can take the patient in this manner or that manner. So, like in radiology, what should be in which situation you will always ask for an imaging? So, or you will start denying. Okay, we can wait and go ahead later on with this testing first. Especially, I am very much concerned about the antenatal care, wherein the pregnant female has to go regularly for an ultrasound testing. And then, as you mentioned, will you start accepting, okay, or reducing or doing certain protocol, whether the plain scans has to be absolutely fine versus the contrast, and handling the guided procedures, which are very important again at some or the other level. Similarly, in pathology, do we have any alternative techniques to be developed for FNACs or bone marrows to be done? Or is it like the role of molecular technique or the technology wherein we say liquid biopsies, I mean, which has been heard a lot, will be coming into more picture? So what is your take first, Dr. Handu, on this with the pathological aspect and the procedures which are going to be?
So, I would like to actually go to my presentation. If you just go there, I would like to show a few things there because Dr. Gulati asked for a
Right.
test. Can you just open that up?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm on my presentation. Just give me a second. I want to reach that particular slide. Yes. So, Dr. Gulati, the good news is this man, Of course, a lot of people may not be very big fans of this man, but this man himself actually came up with something which was, in fact, first time probably in the world, the president of United States of America unveiling, opening up a particular instrument and giving you a possibility of, doing a point of care testing. Of course, it's not available in the country so far, and of whatever little discussions I've had with this company, they are not likely to get it pretty soon. It might take them some more time to get this particular instrument here. This is an instrument which is primarily based on some kind of an altered mechanism of RT-PCR based methodology, and is giving you this information, and is supposedly very 100% sensitive, 100% specific. I don't know whether that's really true or not, but then that part of it is already there, and people are working on these lines. We are also working at possibility of having card-based testing. Of course, we've heard a lot of negatives about it recently, but then that's how the things will develop, and over a period of time, I think things will get better. As far as the other tests are concerned, I'll just show you another slide which is important for us to know, and that's about the fact, just let me just reach there 1 second. And because another important aspect is that we have to keep on following the regulations which keep coming on regular time intervals. Just 1 second, I'm just showing you that. So if we go here, the idea of doing is, so if I would want to do a test, I would like to have an antibody based testing available for sure, complemented with an RT-PCR. And there was a question to this effect by Dr. Roy also, which I could see in the chat box. The idea is that when you're trying to do an antibody testing, you are trying to figure out whether what is the current immune status of that individual, and that would really help. And in fact, a lot of it is already being, given by the ICMR also. And if we follow this algorithm, what is given in the slide, where you are seeing the RT-PCR with the IgG and IgM, a lot of decisions can potentially be taken. The challenge is when you do an IgG IgM and it comes out to be negative, then you will have to wait for an RT-PCR. So practically speaking, we do not have really a test available right at this point of time in the country to give you a quick answer, just like a creatinine for a CT scan. As far as testing otherwise is concerned, I mean, we can move the presentation, Dr. Prakash. So the idea is that if you're looking at testing per se, the idea is that we will need to have a test which is reliable, which is quick. We can do it faster, and at the same time, we should be able to make sure that we're not giving any false negatives. And in our practices, these kind of tests will be very difficult to develop, because if you look at it, RT-PCR, by whatever methodology you do, it is still going to take you at least 2 to 3 hours to do testing. And most importantly, the sampling is to be done from the nasal and the oropharyngeal area. And you may not have done an appropriate sampling, or the viral load itself may not be that great. So ultimately, a combination of all the tests together perhaps might give a better option, better modality for everybody to work on.
With this, the same questions what we are having right now from elective to emergency. There is one concept which is,
Dr. Prakash, I would like to interrupt. There is Mr. Sriji who has some query. Sriji, can you introduce yourself and state the query? I think he has left. Dr. Prakash, please continue.
No problem. It's okay. We can understand as for all the audiences and everybody, we are going to be like this in coming years. We will be more virtual, and we will be more smarter enough to handle on digitalizing ourselves. So this is the way we are learning and evolving in with this COVID situation. So on the similar lines, what we were having discussion on what type of testing we are going to be having with the elective versus the interventional part or the emergency part. There is one concept which is going to come up, which was there in the news also by the government of India. It's like emergence of fever clinic. First of all, do you think this concept is going to come very soon? Because we keep on tackling fevers, let it be seasonal and ongoing problems what we have. And as you have, Dr. Handu has already been touched up the role of point of care with a molecular testing coming up for some or the other reasons. But will there be any other type of a point of care testing available in OPD diagnostic centers when we quote it with fever clinics? What would be the role of radiology in the fever clinics? Will there be a substantial role which is going to be helping people are there any recommendations or guidelines coming from any health authorities till now? So, what is your take on this, Dr. Gulati, with the fever clinic concept coming into picture?
Yeah, I think fever clinic concepts in our country makes a lot of sense. Like we have these mohalla clinics. We definitely, especially the period when there's a
Right.
sudden flood in the number of fever patients. So fever clinic makes a lot of sense. And as far as the radiology is concerned, one thing which is absolutely must is, and that's simple to have, that is a X-ray facility for the X-ray test. That should be there in practically every fever clinic. And in addition to that, if you can add a bedside ultrasound, the basic ultrasound, then these two are the modalities which will complete as far as the radiology setup is concerned. But at least X-ray test is absolutely essential.
So what? How do you take it, Dr. Handu, on this? Because there would be many. Because we have understood. I mean, if there is fever, we go to some center and get your blood test done. I mean, what we have understood till now, fever is like dengue, malaria, and then we go ahead. Maybe there are around 50 odd other reasons to have fever, but basically screening, which would be into picture, there would be one more additional thing. So what would be the mixture or the set of the laboratory parameters what we seek, or the POCTs coming into role?
So two aspects, Dr. Prakash. First aspect with respect to fever clinic. As far as the fever clinics are concerned, the fever clinic concept has already come into the picture, because ICMR itself is making sure that every healthcare provider is now able to have what is called a fever clinic available in their center. Like for instance, if you look at our hospital, whether in Delhi or in Mumbai, both of these places we are having fever clinics, which are otherwise called, some people call it respiratory triage, some people call it flu clinic, some people call it fever clinic. By whatever may be the name, fever clinics are here to stay for a while. Having said that, what is very important and what is worrisome is, if you look at what Dr. Parag said, in Maharashtra, in Mumbai, you are already looking at fever without any respiratory symptoms turning out to be malaria, and at the same time similar kind of symptoms turning out to be COVID. Now, the purpose of fever clinic itself is questionable under such circumstances. Anyway, so coming back to the discussion about point of care devices, so my wish is, if I could get an antigen from the viral genome which would be specific to this virus, and I could put it on a lateral immunochromatography technique on a card and make it available as a blood test, it would be fantastic. That would make our life very, very simple, just like the way we have it in malaria. Unfortunately, despite these people trying to get the antigen on a card, it has not worked. It is not
Right.
giving the sensitivity which is as high as, say, 90% or 100%. The sensitivity is as low as 34%, to some claiming as high as 80%, but the variability is so much, 34 to 80% is huge. So therefore, WHO itself has said antigens not to be done. Now comes the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is, how do you still want to go ahead? You have a fever clinic, you get a patient into a fever clinic. Now you're trying to figure out, are you having a patient with fever who is malaria, who is dengue, who is chikungunya, or who is having COVID? So out of all of them, the most scariest one is the COVID part of it first. And then obviously with decreasing order of frequency, probably the next comes dengue, and then comes malaria, and then comes chikungunya. This is probably what my thought would come in this. So therefore, what I would like to have in a typical fever clinic, I would like to make sure that I have a point of care device, something like which Mr. Trump actually showed us, which is able to give us pretty good or a decent sensitivity for COVID. It clears me of the COVID part of it, and then I have parallelly available the antigen test for dengue, which is also clearing me out and then leading me to, say, malaria or any other febrile illness. So as long as I'm having a possibility of triaging it within the system and the entire thing happening, say, within a short span of about half an hour or 1 hour or 2 hours, that would make life very good. But I think at this point of time, it's still wishful thinking.
Right. I can understand that, because screening malaria and dengue and chikungunya has become way far easier than we are still trying to figure out with the COVID one, and it is going to be a problem. Now, coming back to our, challenging part again, which we had already started discussing on, like screening versus the diagnostic testing. I think most of the thing have been covered. But I just want to make a point out of it. Is biosafety only enough, or we need to redefine our policies for our healthcare staff or the company employees, or we do receive something called as in pre-employment checkups from time to time. Is this a way of going ahead for pre-employment checkup or healthcare staff, or will will there be any different additions, or will there be any modifications to be made, whether it has to be periodic or something like that? So how do we take it, Dr. Gulati, on this?
Yeah, I think these regular health checkups, they have to stay in addition to few more things. And the most important of them is that it has to be done more frequently. And based upon what exactly that guy is going to do, in which department he's working, you can add or subtract a few of the more tests. Second thing which is important, what I feel is that they have to be told about the proper hygiene and how to use PPPs, not to stay in the department without mask. So all these things, they have to become part of the regular employment of the. As such, it's mandatory for any services which you are providing to regularly train these guys to carry out different type of training programs for them. But these training programs about their health, about the safety, they will have to be done at more regular intervals. That will become important. And of course, these regular health checkups, they have to go on, what we are doing right now.
So, what about your views on this, Dr. Handu? Because are we going to be the same, or we are going to change the way our health policies are currently?
So, Dr. Prakash, if we look at it from this standpoint, from a pre-employment health checkup point of view, now, as a part of the pre-employment health checkup, the only thing that we have so far been, insisting on, especially from the laboratory standpoint, is to know whether the person is having vaccination against hepatitis B, right? Because that's the only one which has been actually adopted by almost everyone. Now, in this particular case, having a vaccine, though there is a lot of hope and a lot of possibility that it might come up, I have a feel that because again, it's an RNA virus, just like HIV and other viruses, which are like RNA viruses, for them to really get a vaccine against it will become a bit tough. It is not going to be easy getting it. So maybe over a period of time when the vaccine is available, probably just like hepatitis B, we would also like to have a vaccination and probably the titers against COVID. Now, this is again wishful thinking. If this happens, it would be great. But this is something which probably will come in due course of time. As far as changing our lifestyle and changing our practices concerned, I think we are already into that picture. If you look at it, our lifestyle has changed completely. We have stopped coming out of our homes. We are scared of every individual on the road. Even when you're standing across on a shop or something, you're again scared that there are just too many people here and I wouldn't want to stand there. So all this probably is going to be remaining there for quite some time. I have a very strong feeling we are not looking at less than 6 months to a year, and that again I'm being very optimistic. Having said all this, the life has changed and it is due to change more. There will be a requirement for all of us to be very cautious and conscious, and we will have to take things as they come to us.
So I just want to have just 2 minutes of your attention, because even we are into an organization where we are around 500 people in our Horiba company, and we also are setting up our factory setups at Nagpur facility. So as a part and parcel of the scientific affair of the medical team, we are supposed to design and define some screening protocols. So I wanted to have your views also, because we have been looking into all meta-analysis and coming up to this point, okay, how we can start doing this screening for the people who are going to be at the construction side or the labor side or as an employee sides. So this is what we defined and designed, is like the demographic details, as which was already elaborated by Dr. Gulati when we were discussing, which have a basic details, and there is a questionnaire whether the patient is coming from an hotspot to a containment zone, or some evidences where he has been in association with any COVID patient or that particular area. A basic questionnaire about the symptoms, what we generally have been looked upon across the globe, and we try to add it up with the mandate of like fever, cough, and sore throat, and then the medical history for the comorbidities, and probably any treatment or any symptoms which have been already there for a long-standing illnesses. So this is our basic demographic detail. Then to going to the actual screening part, wherein no screening is completed without doing any testing, right? What we understand today. So we have formulated something called a general medical examination with fever and SpO2 because it is having an area where you are having a respiratory illness. Okay, and it was also said in one of the journal and coming into an American journal which says, okay, buying an SpO2 mobile device will be mandatory like a mask, so that they can monitor themselves at home with a pulse oximeter, which is a mobile device, and it can send signals to the nearby healthcare facility in any dire emergencies. Then we coming to the main aspect what we are having, diagnostic investigation. So we could pull out some pathological investigations which are like complete blood count and going ahead with like an HB, TLC, and absolute lymphocyte count. As been it is in spoken, there is lymphopenia, there is lymphopenia. So probably yes, we're looking into this. CRP levels, of course, for any it's non-specific, but again, it has got its role in COVID infection. And on radiology front, we added up to an X-ray test, which is much more easier rather than and economically reliable resource for us. So this is what we had designed, and these are our action protocols, which we can share and have your views again. In any scenarios where we are having any symptomatic, any finding which is coming up, right from the demographic detail to the investigations, we have defined our 4 different protocols to take care of. So it is like we why did we wanted as an understanding with you all people being as an expert in the fraternity. So how does we go about to a screening facility or a testing part when at a company or at a factory levels, because it is not been given to any guidelines till now. I don't think ICMR or any government facility has come up with any guideline for how do we go when the lockdown is eased. How do our healthcare staff coming to picture? So probably this is what we thought of, and we would like to share with you all how we can go about it, and is this actually helping or is it relevant on all the aspects or not. And this is how we did this. We had an isolation and area with the screening, the mobile van, and creating an area where the sanitization is happening in and out and exiting, and entry and exit points, and taking the detailings. So probably what was the matter of point or discussion, like we need to have more screening also over the diagnostic part as well. So this is what I was thinking to share with you, both the experts, and we can have your inputs again on this part. And coming back to, I mean, the last part of the discussion, the future of diagnostic practices, which is what we were talking since a long time on how do we go about what is the preparedness and how do we take care of it. So future of diagnostic practices in COVID era, whether automation and digitalization are going to play a very huge role, as we can go with the non-touch technique. What will be the role of artificial intelligence, because it has come up in a very big time now. I mean, I had been pumped up with many mobile apps. Use this. This can help. Use that. This can help. So probably we are looking into an increasing role of artificial intelligence. Whether it would be like mandatory to practice telemedicine, which is just a word in a country like India, but is it going to take more higher ups? So what is your take on this, Dr. Gulati? How do we go about with the future of our diagnostic areas?
Yeah, I think both the things, digitalization as well as AI, artificial intelligence, they are going to play a very important role in near future. And it is for us also that we should start using these two as much as possible. Like digitalization that can be used at every stage of your setup, right from the patient registration till the discharge or till the report dispatch is concerned. The registration, the payment, and everything that can be done, and they're all we should use digitalization as far as possible. Even the data printing and everything, again, digitalization can be used. So digitalization, we should try to exploit it to our benefit as much as possible. Question of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, again, is going to be a big boon for us. Artificial intelligence, if we talk about the COVID, in COVID, there are a number of studies which have been done in US as well as in Europe, where they have tried to use it not only for picking up pneumonia, they have also tried to diagnose COVID based upon the AI, where all the lesions are, the distribution pattern. Basically, you have to do the machine learning, and you feed more and more of these cases, the more and more accuracy of the will come out. Now,
Right.
this will help us in two ways. This will cut the load on our radiologists. right? And number two, it definitely there are studies which have shown that at times, if the radiologist is too tired, probably he commits more mistakes than the AI will commit.
Right.
So AI, again, whether COVID or no COVID, anywhere in every sphere of radiology, AI is going to play a very important role. And it is for us. There are a lot of people who are scared that maybe AI will take away the jobs of the radiologists. I don't agree with that. It is for us. We should make AI our slave. We should not become slave of AI. Like one very simple example in COVID, I tell you, there are a number of CT scores which have come. Now, if you try to do CT scoring on your own, you will not be that accurate. You will be spending much more time. If you use AI to calculate the CT scoring or the CT severity score of AI, you will not only be more accurate, but you will be saving a lot of human energy. So AI, again, whether COVID, no COVID, is going to play a very, very important role, and we should try to develop it, and we should try to make part of us, part of our day-to-day routine as early as possible. And same is true for digitalization.
Right. So I think on pathology aspect also, we know there is total lab automations and digitalization which is available till date. And somewhere we are hesitant enough to completely use it, or somewhere we think, okay, there has to be a person there. Like we know visions are available, which gives you a digitalization of your slides, and you can send it across for second opinion and what so not. But still, it's not completely in picture. Maybe it is not in reach, but probably now it will be in the reach. So, what do you think on this?
So I agree with you, Prakash. I think the artificial intelligence and digitalization in pathology has started quite some time back. As you rightly pointed out, I think we are a bit conservative in accepting it as a part of our life. And it is just a matter of time that it will be done, because the most important thing is, in fact, I'll tell you one very interesting stuff in this particular COVID era itself. I would have never imagined that I can get an audit of my laboratory done using video conferencing, but that's what happened. Because when ICMR wanted anybody to start an the laboratory, they needed to have an NABL accreditation for a RT-PCR testing. And to have NABL accreditation in COVID times is practically impossible. You couldn't have thought of. Yet
Right.
NABL itself has started taking such an initiative that you're doing the entire audit process on video conferencing, and the assessor actually watching each and every step that you're processing, even going through your entire process, looking at the facility, checking out accommodation, checking out your calibrations, etc., etc., etc. And only then they give you approvals. And then once the NABL accreditation happens, and then ICMR looks into it and gives you the approvals as well. Best proof of digitalization, especially in this kind of a time, is so obvious that it's going to be a part of our life. So therefore, I strongly believe that automation, digitalization, artificial intelligence are here to stay. And with each passing day, they are going to be much more important in our routine practices than what we are even practicing at this point of time.
Right. Sir, you have a question which is to you, which has been given by Dr. Rajesh Bansal. He is asking what is the role of or any importance of ferritin and LDH in this particular patients, the COVID-19 patients.
Yeah. So the thing is, as far as the ferritin, LDH, and there was another question somebody had asked about
IL-6, IL-6 and IL-10.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the cytokine storm markers. I unfortunately did not put it as a slide in my presentation. I had it though. But anyways, the thing is that these particular markers are markers of inflammation. And for all practical purposes, whenever there will be a cytokine storm, there will be increase in these levels vis-a-vis a normal individual. We have shown you the CRP in one of the slides earlier, where we showed that CRP levels go up significantly, and so does LDH, so does ferritin. It's almost something like what you get in a typical macrophage activation syndrome. You have all these markers going up, and in fact, they do not really have a diagnostic value, but they have more of a prognostic value.
Right.
So in all such circumstances, if one is able to do all these tests serially and watch them serially, you will be able to get a far better information, and that will probably help in a much better manner.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for that. So I think we had headed and towards the end of our session, and I think the questions which we had put up across probably will help every one of us till whoever is practicing the diagnostic practice, or say in healthcare, or say the nursing homes, it is going to be there. So as to put up as an end of the session, before thanking you, I we have to be more creative and innovative. This is what I thought to put it across. So accordingly, I had put this slide of creativity is thinking up the new things, which we are actually thinking up. And I don't know, is it a blessing in disguise which God has given in the form of COVID to think more out of the box? And secondly, innovation is doing new things. So we are basically creativity is coming up in a big time, and also we are innovating. Like right now, we are innovating. Probably we will be having a lot of more virtual meetings, so over these type of sessions, rather than I can really stay away, because going to a 5-star hotel and paying a hefty amount for traveling and coming back will be saved by this in some or the other
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But there would be certain instances where we have to practically go and show to ourselves as well. But yes, creativity is going to be a big thing, and innovative ideas should be there. And with this, I would actually like to thank both of you to taking out your time, coming and discussing the issues which are actually of the practical point in the diagnostic industry, or say in the diagnostic services. Let it be radiology, pathology, microbiology. These are all the diagnostic service and a big backbone, which is what I think as a diagnostician today. COVID has given a lot of recognition all of a sudden to the diagnostic part. And people are actually looking forward first to the diagnostic and then going to the treatment. If I'm correct me, I mean, if I'm going wrong somewhere. And thank you so much, Dr. Gulati, and thank you so much, Dr. Handu sir, in
Thank
taking
you.
out time and being there, discussing the issues. And that was a really fantastic conversation, at least I had with you, both of the experts of your fraternities. And thank you so much. And thank you so much, the audiences who have been joined us. And for your feedbacks, queries, and suggestions to both the speakers and the experts of their subjects, and to us, you can write down to hematology.hin@horiba.com. And we are going to come up with many more discussions and live debates, rather than just going on the plain presentations where we listen for 5 minutes and then we go off the line somewhere. All right. And thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
And with this, I
Thank
would like to take a leave and take care, stay healthy, stay safe, and probably lockdown 3.0 would take give us certain ease and breathe, and also new creativities to practice our routine day to day. Thank you so much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, and Jai Hind as well.
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.